One quiet summer evening in 2011, something unusual happened in the town of Port St. Lucie, Florida. From the outside, it looked like just another house where young people were having fun and laughing to the rhythm of music. But what was happening inside was something that would shock the entire country when it came to light. However, no one was aware of this. The truth, hidden within the house, where the laughter of the young people echoed, was actually concealed in the shadow of those laughs. And that night, one of Port St. Lucie's ordinary streets would go down in history as the site of a horrific tragedy. Most of those who entered the house noticed an odd smell inside, but couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Some thought it was the smell of an animal. Others thought it was the smell of trash. Everyone was so caught up in the fun that they didn't pay attention to it, but one person knew that a terrible secret was hidden in the locked room on the upper floor of the house. Tyler Hadley was born on December 16, 1993, in Port St. Lucie, Florida. As a child, Tyler was known to be quiet and introverted. He was thin, short, and often went unnoticed by his peers. He was quiet, but that silence was not innocent loneliness. According to his friends, there was sometimes an inexplicable emptiness in his eyes. Because he was bullied at school, he couldn't join popular groups. He chose to stay on the sidelines because he had difficulty proving himself. Loneliness was always with him. The anger and depression that built up inside him became even more pronounced during adolescence. Methods such as medication and counseling attempts were not enough to fill the void. Tyler's mother, Mary Jo Hadley, was a teacher who, by profession, instilled hope in other people's children. She cared for students with disabilities, showed compassion, and supported families. Everyone who knew her described her as a kind, helpful, and patient person. She tried to protect her own son with the same patience. She noticed his withdrawal and made an effort to be there for him. But no matter how hard she tried, the distance between her and Tyler grew instead of shrinking. As a mother, she sensed that her son was being pulled into darkness, but there was nothing she could do to stop it. Blake Hadley was the father of the family. He was a disciplined, authoritarian man who worked for an electric company. People around him saw him as a quiet, responsible, hard-working father. Although his family was the most important thing to him, sometimes the silence in the house turned into harsh outbursts. He tried to discipline his son to ensure his future and help him build a proper life, setting rules for him. Tyler, however, saw these rules as oppression. Two different worlds collided within the same home. From the outside, the Hadley family looked like an ordinary American family. The father went to work, the mother helped the children at school, and their sons went to school. But contrary to the picture seen from the outside, there was conflict within the home. The atmosphere at home was not as peaceful as it appeared from the outside. Caught between Mary Jo's protective, understanding approach and Blake's strict, rule-oriented nature, Tyler needed his mother's love on the one hand, but hated his father's authority on the other. This tension would build up over the years and lead to irreversible consequences. Tyler Hadley appeared to be an ordinary young man from the outside. He had grown up in the quiet neighborhoods of Port St. Lucie, where everyone knew each other. Tyler was a child who went to school, spent time with friends, and enjoyed sharing on social media. But behind this facade lay a completely different storm. Tyler had a few close friends from school, though their bond was not particularly strong. The young people who spent time with him were generally similar in that they were seen as marginal at school, struggled to follow rules, or felt somewhat excluded. His friends talked about Tyler's strange jokes and weird looks. Some said that Tyler always made dark jokes, and that these jokes sometimes became disturbing. But among young people, this kind of behavior is often not taken seriously. It is dismissed as teenage banter. His friend's failure to take his behavior seriously led him to withdraw further into himself. Tyler's mental health began to deteriorate as a result of his exposure to drugs and alcohol. During his adolescence, between the ages of 15 and 17, he began drinking alcohol regularly and experimenting with drugs. He was known to use marijuana, pills, and even heavier drugs. Drugs began to seriously affect Tyler's mood. He was already a young man struggling with depression and outbursts of anger. Drugs made these fluctuations even more pronounced. Among his friends, however, this behavior made him seem a little cooler. Tyler was trying to find a sense of acceptance that he had never achieved before. In recent months, the situation had worsened. Tyler's drug experiments, his late-night online chats, and his increasing withdrawal from others were causing tension with his family. He perceived his father's harsh reactions as pressure and felt that his father did not understand him. Due to fluctuations in his mood, he would sometimes lock himself in his room and sit in silence for hours or lose control of his anger and punch objects. And amidst all these contradictions, a dark idea began to take root in Tyler's mind: taking control, eliminating the rules, the pressure, the restrictions. Perhaps the only way to do that was to remove the obstacles closest to him. Saturday evening, July 16, 2011. It was a typical weekend at the Hadley family home. As the sun set, the Hadley home appeared quiet. Mary Jo was spending time on her computer in the living room, while Blake was in his bedroom. Tyler had locked himself in his room, but his mind was far from ordinary. Earlier that day, Tyler had sent some strange messages to a few close friends. In these messages, he said, "The house will be empty for the party because my parents won't be there." Those who heard this laughed it off. No one took such a possibility seriously, because everyone knew that Tyler's family would never allow such a thing. To them, it was just one of Tyler's unrealistic statements. But he was persistent. The house wasn't really going to be empty. Mary Jo and Blake Hadley were there. But for Tyler, it didn't need to be empty, because he had already devised a horrific plan in his mind. A few weeks before the incident, Tyler began making strange remarks to his friends. To one of them, he said with a chilling seriousness, "I'm planning to kill my parents." His friends either thought he was joking or were so used to his exaggerated talk that they didn't take him seriously. Because among Tyler's friends, such dark and disturbing remarks were sometimes made in jest. No one even considered the possibility that he might actually do such a thing. This situation made Tyler feel even more invisible and convinced himself that his plan was almost inevitable. Don't you think these words Tyler said to those around him are a sign that things are getting dangerous? If you heard something like this, would you just dismiss it as a teenage joke, or would you take it seriously? Around 5:15 p.m., Tyler had already imagined what was about to happen countless times in his head. Tyler had begun his preparations, starting by secretly hiding both of his parents' phones since his family did not have a landline. He did not need to worry about his parents calling. Tyler locked his family's black Labrador retriever in a closet, fearing it might harm him or attract the neighbors' attention. After taking all necessary precautions, Tyler took 3 ecstasy pills, and once he felt sufficiently energized and in the right headspace, grabbed a hammer from the garage. Tyler walked slowly into the living room. After watching her for a moment from behind, he raised the hammer and struck Mary Jo on the back of the head. Mary Jo's screams brought Blake out of the bedroom, and within seconds he ran to the room where the commotion was happening. Blake froze when he saw Tyler violently attacking his wife. Blake shouted, "Why?" Tyler replied, "Why not?" and then attacked his father with a hammer, killing him. Within minutes, it was all over, and the house was enveloped in deathly silence. After the murder, Tyler did not panic. He calmly moved on to the second phase of his plan. After killing them, he dragged their bodies into the bedroom. He gathered his parents' bodies in the bedroom and spent 3 hours cleaning up the bloodstains around the house. He piled the blood-stained items into the room where his parents were. He had partially tidied up the scattered items in the house. Then he closed the bedroom door, making the inside invisible. After completing everything and finishing his preparations, he grabbed his phone. He sent a message to his friends. "The party is starting. Come over." After hiding the lifeless bodies in the bedroom, Tyler returned to the house. He turned on the music, adjusted the lights, and shared the party announcement one last time on Facebook. "The party is tonight, at my house." And soon after, young people began flocking to Tyler's house. The first to arrive were Tyler's close friends. He greeted them with a broad smile, as if this were just another ordinary house party for Tyler. As soon as the young people stepped into the house, the music started and laughter filled the air. In no time, the house was crowded. Nearly 60 young people were at the Hadley family home that night. At first glance, this party seemed like an ordinary teenage gathering, but it hid Tyler's darkest secret: his parents lying lifeless in the bedroom. But no one knew that yet. Throughout the party, some of the young people noticed strange details. The house was much more cluttered than usual. The smells were unusually strong. Some of the young people noticed bloodstains on the floor, but others brushed it off with laughter. This is just one of Tyler's jokes. Tyler, meanwhile, was walking around cheerfully among the crowd, laughing and offering drinks to his guests. From the outside, he seemed like a typical host. Tyler, who was usually a shy child, was different that night. He was walking around with a bottle of alcohol in his hand, approaching people with a strange grin on his face. As the night progressed, Tyler's courage grew. Under the influence of alcohol, he whispered to a few of his close friends, "You know, right? My mom and dad aren't here anymore. I killed them." At first, no one took him seriously. They responded with laughter. "Tyler, you're talking nonsense again," they said. But Tyler, without looking away, said, "No, I'm not joking." Still, no one took what he said seriously. One young man would later say in his statement after the incident, "My blood ran cold at that moment, but then everyone in the room started laughing. I joined in, but something inside me told me this wasn't a joke." During the party, the house became increasingly crowded. Some young people were dancing on the table while others were playing music on Tyler's computer. There were alcohol bottles, cigarette butts, and scattered belongings inside the house. Around midnight, Tyler pulled a few close friends aside. To prove the reality of what he had done, he opened the bedroom door. Inside, 2 bodies lay covered in sheets with furniture piled on top of them. His friends stood there in shock, unsure of how to react. One of them decided to tell the police what they had seen. But even then, some of them, still under the influence of alcohol, were saying, "Maybe it's just a joke." The party went on until morning. Music played, drinks were consumed, and laughter echoed. From the outside, it looked like youthful energy and excitement. But the walls of that house hid the terrible truth behind every laugh. Do you think that if one of the young people had taken Tyler's words more seriously that night, perhaps everything would have come to light much sooner? As the party finally drew to a close, the house was in disarray. As the young people left one by one, Tyler remained behind. There was an incomprehensible expression on his face. He was behaving normally, as if the horrific truth that had unfolded in that house hours earlier had never happened. However, by morning, Tyler's entire secret would be exposed. Some of the young people who had come to their senses after the party were disturbed by what they had seen, and when they thought about Tyler's confessions and strange behavior, they realized it wasn't a joke. One of them then made a call to the police. Upon receiving a tip, the police arrived at the Hadley family's house at around 4 a.m. When the police knocked on the door, Tyler opened it. As soon as he opened the door, they were met with an unpleasant odor. Upon entering, they were met with a scene of cigarette butts, empty bottles, and scattered belongings left behind from the party. A few officers noticed the odor. It was sharp, heavy, and unpleasant. It smelled like blood and decay. This place resembled a crime scene more than a party house. The police began checking the rooms of the house one by one. When they finally reached the bedroom, the veil of truth was lifted. When the door opened, 2 bodies covered with sheets were revealed. This proved that Tyler's words throughout the night were no joke. Mary Jo and Blake Hadley were lying lifeless in their own bedroom. Tyler was found by the police shortly thereafter and taken into custody. He was silent, offering no resistance. It was as if he had accepted this outcome long before it happened. The townspeople were shocked when they heard the news. Neighbors couldn't believe their eyes when they saw police cars outside the house that morning. The night before, there had been laughter and loud music coming from the house. But in reality, that house had been a crime scene from start to finish. When Tyler was taken into custody, he was surprisingly calm, and the expression on his face remained unchanged. There was no panic or remorse on his face. It was as if he had known from the beginning that everything would end this way. During the police interrogation, he described the murder in cold detail. He said he had been planning to kill his mother and father that night for a long time. He had quietly moved around the house to catch them off guard, striking his mother from behind with a hammer. He said he attacked his father in the same way when he came running after hearing the noise. Afterward, he went to the bathroom as if nothing had happened, cleaned himself up, and called his friends. His confessions were recorded as the coldest words heard during the investigation, because Tyler showed no signs of anger or regret at any point. On the contrary, he spoke as if he were talking about an ordinary event. Some of the young people also confirmed in their statements to the police that Tyler had made confessions about the murder throughout the party. Many had thought he was drunk and no one had believed he could actually do such a thing. But the truth was coming from Tyler's own mouth. Experts then examined Tyler's psychological state. The results were horrific. It was revealed that he exhibited symptoms of antisocial personality disorder and had almost no sense of empathy. The reason he chose that night was almost unbelievable. Tyler's motivation was to impress his friends, show them something different, and leave a lasting impression. According to the psychologist's report, Tyler believed that by killing his family, he would gain complete control. However, the reason he organized the party was not so much to hide the murder as it was to somehow display the crime he had committed and prove himself to everyone. This is why there was a detail reflected in the police reports. Tyler's greatest fear was not being caught, but being forgotten. After Tyler was taken into custody, the trial process began quickly. The charges were very serious: premeditated murder of his mother and father. The prosecution emphasized that this was not a common murder, but a premeditated and cold-blooded crime. The courtroom was packed from the very first day. Journalists, townspeople, and even some young people who were still reeling from the shock of the incident. All were eagerly awaiting Tyler's statement and the sentence the court would ultimately impose. Tyler Hadley was 17 years old when he was arrested for the murder of his parents, which legally classified him as a minor. However, the brutality and premeditated nature of the crime led the court to try him as an adult. The prosecution argued that Tyler had planned the murder. The research he conducted on his computer and his intention to throw a party after the murder were presented to the court as some of the strongest evidence that he had planned the crime. According to them, this was not only an attempt to hide the fact that he had killed his family, but also an attempt to boast about this horrific act. His lawyers attempted to build their defense around Tyler's age. He was not yet of legal age, and it was argued that his mental health was not fully intact due to the drugs and medications he had been using as a result of severe depression he was experiencing at the time. Psychological reports emphasize that Tyler's prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls impulses and decision-making processes, was not fully developed due to his young age. However, there was a plan that these reports would not be sufficient. Locking the doors, hiding the phones, and inviting his friends to the party. Throughout the trial, Tyler's testimony did not change. He showed no remorse and shed no tears. He watched what was happening with a cool head, as if it were not his own life. When the day of the verdict finally arrived, the jury quickly reached a decision. Tyler Hadley was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge announced that he had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A silence fell over the courtroom. This decision meant that justice had been served, at least to some extent. Neighbors and family friends breathed a sigh of relief, because the truth was now certain. That night's party was not just a gathering of young people having fun, but a part of a murder story that would go down in history. When Tyler Hadley's trial ended, it left behind not only a legal verdict but also a deep trauma etched into the memory of a town. While his parents' gravestones still stand in Port St. Lucie, supported by the prayers of their loved ones, the person responsible for their deaths, their own son, was sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. But what truly makes this story unforgettable is not just the murder itself. What is even more terrifying is that Tyler was able to present this act of violence as if it were part of a game. Inside the house, there were young people laughing, loud music, and alcohol. But behind those same walls, the silent screams of a mother and father were hidden. Even today, this incident is discussed under the heading of youth, anger, and carelessness. But it actually tells us much more than that. It shows what a person can do when they completely lose their sense of empathy, and how a society can fail to see the signs right before its eyes. And the question remains, is what turns a person into a monster an innate darkness? Or is it the environment pushing them step by step toward the abyss?